Well, let me welcome you. This is the Future Trends Forum. My name is Brian Alexander. I'm your host and cat herder for this session. I'm very glad to see all of you here today. Let me welcome all of you to the new academic year. We have just started the 2017-2018 academic year. The purpose of today's session is to get you to think about that year and what you expect. This is a forum dedicated to exploring the future of education. And what better way to do that than by looking at the short-term future right ahead of us. So let's begin. In order to start, let me just set the stage by talking about what the forum is and where it came from. So to begin with, Tara, could you please advance to the next slide? Thank you. This is a discussion area. This is a video conference discussion space, and it spins out of the Future Trends in Technology and Education project. Now, that is a research project which has been going on for almost 6 years now, taking a look at current trend lines in technology and education. The idea is to examine those closely in order to get a better sense of where the future is likely to head. Just this morning, we released the September issue, which is the biggest so far. More information, more words, more images, and more trends than ever before. If you haven't seen it, go to ftte.us. You can download a few copies. Take a look, subscribe if you're interested. But that's a publication of it. This, what we have here today, this is discussion. This is for conversation among all of us. Now, the key part of this, if we go to the next slide here, is that this conversation should be as international as possible. Now, we're talking about the next academic year. This is happening all the way around the world. We're having classes start, research projects advance, students return or arrive for the first time. And it's important to think about this as a global discussion, a global context. And you can see here that we've had participants come from just about every continent on Earth, from the Middle East to Australia to Central and Eastern Asia to Europe, South America, and North America. So as we go, one thing to bear in mind when you think of everything from textbooks to open access and scholarly publication to pedagogy, think about where this could go on a global stage. Now, we can only do this work with the support of some very, very generous entities. I'd like to thank all of them right now. To begin with, NYSERDAT from New York State, a nonprofit that helps connect New York State's colleges, universities, libraries, and museums to the internet. We're very grateful to them for their support. We're also grateful to Shindig, because Shindig has provided this wonderful technology. And let me just take a minute to show you a bit about the technology so that you can see where everything is. Right now, where I am and where this briefly, this PowerPoint presentation is called the stage. And it's called that because everybody here can see and hear us. And you can join us on the stage. But for now, you're below in the whole conversation swarm where all the participants are. And if you look around right now, you can see there are video feeds. So you can see Lisa Steffens, who's probably wondering right now why I'm calling her out in her awesome orange and blue outfit. Or you could see shadows or silhouettes like Ricardo, or a still photo like the one of Chris. Each of those represents one person or one sign-in, and each of those is who you can talk to. So if you'd like to connect with them, simply double-click on their icon, and if they're ready to talk to you, your two images will click together like a pair of Lego bricks, and you'll have your own private audio-visual bubble. A kind of cone of silence descends upon you, which is really handy, and we can play with that a bit today. Now, also here in this space are other tools for conversing with everybody here. Let me just show you 3 of them. So if you go back to the bottom of the screen, I mentioned on the far left, that white strip is a little number that shows how many people are here. I'm seeing 24 right now. Next to that is a text chat. And that's just a text chat box, which lets you text to everybody who's here. So you can say hello to Tara, David Stone, Lisa Steffens, Josh Callahan, David Hooker, Michelle Augustin, and so on. And that's a great spot for informal conversation and for chatter. So please use that. That's one way. The second way is if you would like to join us on stage. That's easy as can be. And you have 2 ways of doing that, actually. In the middle of that white strip at the bottom of the screen, it's a little raised hand icon. Click that, and that tells you when to join us on stage. And when we're ready, we'll beam you up. It's really easy to do. If that's too complicated, over here, just a little further over on the edge of the screen, you'll see a kind of teal-colored box with the words "Join Podium." Just click that, and that should yank you up on stage. So if your mic is working, your camera is working, click that and join us. Now, it might be that you don't feel like joining us on stage because you're shy, or more likely because your mic and camera don't work, or you're in a public space, whatever. That's fine, but you still want to contribute. you can use a chat box, or back down there in that white strip, there's a little question mark. Click that, and you can type in a question or a comment. So once you do that, you can flash it on the screen. I'll read it out loud so everyone can see and hear it. So 3 different ways for interacting with us. Again, this is a conversation-oriented platform. Now, there's another way to support us, by the way. We've already had mentioned Eisernet and Shindig, but there's also Patreon, where we have dozens and dozens of people who have signed on to support this work in the future of education. If you haven't been there before, patreon.com is a crowdfunding platform, and you can contribute as little as $1 a month to help keep all the lights on and keep this work going. So please, if you haven't looked at it before, go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander. The link is right there in the image, and we'd love any support you can give. Now, moving on. Today, this is a community session, so we don't have a guest that's going to be on stage that we can interrogate. Instead, the guest to interrogate is all of you. We're taking a look at what you see coming up over the next 8-10 months, where you think educational technology, education is going. I have a stack of questions and a bunch of ideas, but I want to hear from you all first. So I'm going to ask you a few questions to get the ball rolling, but that's where we are today. So let me just ask a quick question for everybody here. And again, you can answer it by coming up on stage, or by typing in a text question, or by hitting something in the discussion part. The first question is, where do you see students changing this year? And it could be any age students, traditionally undergraduates, 18 to 21. It could be adult learners. Where do you see them changing? Are they more political, less political, more involved in technology, more inclined to be makers, withdrawing from society? What do you think? Power to ask questions that can just kill any conversation, can kind of open up a sucking vacuum, a void that destroys everything. But I'd like to hear from you guys. Lisa, Stefan, again, keep in mind, we're just a week or so into September, so you're just seeing these students or seeing them back again. So think about what your impressions are. Think what you've learned over the summer. Lisa Stefan, since from her experience, she sees several who appear overwhelmed or frightened at the semester start. That seems true. Is that more true? Do you see more of that kind of stress and anxiety? Rita chimes in and thinks that learners today have even more stressors than ever. That's a really important difference. So maybe we have a more stressed out student body. I agree, absolutely, Rita. That definitely impacts their learning. We kind of have built a lot of education on calculated application of stress to provoke learning, the fear of tests and so forth, deadlines. But it may be that the total amount of stress the students experience now is too much and is going to backfire, and they won't be able to learn as much. How about the rest of you? Any other observations about students these days? How students are changing? Over on Twitter, I asked people for what they saw as inspiring to them in the future of education. And the leading response was students, overwhelmingly. They saw that students' creativity, students' optimism, students' energy, all of that was given the biggest dose of optimism for the future. And I was really impressed by that. I think that speaks a lot to what we do in education, and we ultimately care about students. Rita adds the students are leading pedagogical changes. Excellent point. We often forget that when we think about technology, we think about faculty, support staff, got to keep in mind the students. And Lauren G adds a different point of view. She says, from a non-traditional point of view, they seem to want more ways to be involved through clubs, groups, mentoring, etc. Laura, that's a really good point. Do you think that the student athletics play a role in it as well? Michelle adds that they're more accepting of diversity in terms of those with different abilities and from various cultures. That's absolute. I think at some point we might overdo that, but I think that is right now a really, really important point. Just for example, let me share this. I'll put this in the chat box. You can see the new poll or new survey, big survey about American religions came out. A huge, huge study looked at 110,000 people and asked them about their religious beliefs. Really, really interesting stuff, all kinds of stuff. But one key point, I think, and this is what Michelle's talking about, is that the younger generations are more religiously diverse, as well as ethnically diverse. So we have larger numbers of Hispanics and Latinos, larger numbers of Asian Americans especially. But also, if you look at the variety of religions involved, they're much more diverse than they were just 25 years ago. Hello, Vicki.
Hi.
Where are you today?
I am coming from Kirkwood Community College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in my new office.
Oh, pan the camera around. Let's see it.
Oh, it's kind of sad.
No,
I have regalia and paraphernalia and
good.
several to-do lists involving universal design concepts. So
it's not sad. UDL is important. Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on the conversation about students. What I'm seeing here, and I'm on a completely different scale here in terms of a larger institution, but you know, I just see such engagement with students, and I think it's they're not settling for the non-discussion and just letting the lecture happen. And I think some of that's probably political. Of course, with impending immigration things, I'll just leave that very vague. But also as the student loan conversation is coming to the forefront again, I think that's going to affect a lot of students. And I think we'll see more, and we'll have to kind of maybe have some guidance so that they can keep everything going and while they're engaging societally, to keep engaged academically as well, so that can be a symbiotic thing and not something that's at odds.
Well, institutionally at your campus, who would take the lead in that? Would that be faculty? Would that be advisors?
That's a great question. I'm kind of, since I'm KCELT, which is the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, I think we can be a part of that because we can be a part of it across the whole. But I think it's showing that it's okay to be engaging and be engaging in ways. So it's kind of fun to be doing this. So far so good. But I think it's powerful with the responsibility, but I think in a way that can be create dialogue and not opposition. So I think those are all very good things.
Those are good things. That makes a lot of sense. I really wonder about the energy the students are showing in the class to not just accept lecture, but to want to direct conversation. In the chat, we had Rita was mentioning students leading into pedagogical changes. I wonder how that holds out for the year. Will you see more of that? Will it slacken as the semester goes on? Will it stay the same? I'd be interested. How long have you been there now, Vicki?
This is week 4. So
you're a veteran by now. You've settled in.
But semesters are great compared to terms. It's not as insane. So it's nice to have time to kind of think, reflect, and plan. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. Well, I'm glad to see you, and welcome to your new position.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, we have a couple more comments from people. Rita mentioned student-led courses, which is very exciting. Rita, where is that? And Lauren G says that students at her campus, and Lauren, if you could say where that is, are 36 years old. So they want clubs that offer them the ability to develop soft skills. Ah, that's fascinating, Lisa. That's the one I wanted to lead off with. And we followed this on a different angle. What are the big understand, Lisa, understand. What are the big technological issues that you see for the next academic year? Are you seeing changes in the LMS world? Are you seeing, for example, robotics? Are you seeing around you that people are likely to work in automation in education? Is there a big data analytics project happening? What do you think? What do you see as the big technological change that's happening at your institution where you are? And my institution, again, community college, Research One University, liberal arts college, museum, library, and Rita leaps ahead and mentions data science and learning analytics. Seeing a lot of that. That's a huge, huge issue. If you get a chance, Rita, if you could say a bit about how Berkeley is going to institutionalize that, I'd be really curious. And digital pedagogy. Yes, we're all trying to figure out how to teach better with all this stuff. And again, you saw from Vicki that it's really easy to go up on stage and chat, and you can see, of course, by clicking the Ask button, you can ask a question if you'd like to go further. what other technological changes or forces are you seeing at play at your institution over the next year? David, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I've read things about this kind of, in terms of the IT world, there's been always kind of a pulse between a switch between centralization, decentralization, things becoming more centralized control, as people kind of try to become more strategic with their use of technology in the institution. I can't speculate about the exact activities at Cindy's institution, but I've been through kind of that change in the past. I think it's part of a broader change where there is IT and technology is becoming more part of the normal operation of the business side of the university. The academics, you can't be a registrar without having technology as part of your activities and things. And so I think everywhere technology is shifting from becoming completely a separate specialized place and becoming part of the more mainstream operation institutions. And so it's expected. I could say it's going to happen everywhere, but there in certain areas, I think in certain places, it makes a lot of sense.
No, it's a really good point. I'm sorry, where are you again?
I'm at Penn State.
So Penn State's huge. So when IT is everywhere, that means you're kind of like oxygen at this point.
Right. And then we have, of course, the World Campus, which is our online program outreach area too. So that's been a big piece of the university for many years. So,
well, we did I think it's interesting when I work with smaller institutions, small colleges or medium scale colleges, there's often a tension about where the IT department should live. Should it be affiliated more with the academic side, so with an academic dean or VP for academic affairs, or should it be more with the finance and operations side, so under the CFO, or sometimes both. It'll be split in two. So say for example, back-end IT, systems administration will go over to the CFO, and then say educational technology will put to the dean of academic affairs. It's a classic issue. And you're quite right to bring up the centripetal versus centrifugal forces, where it's either centralized or it's really torn to pieces. That's a really good point, a really good answer. I hope Cindy gets a chance. Oh, Cindy's with Learning Technologies. Thank you, Cindy. We have this recorded, so we can go on. But Dave, stick around for a minute. Stick around. We have a question from George Station. And George wants to know, he's wondering if folks have thoughts about comparing changes in first-year undergrad versus grad student levels of classroom engagement. So, George, if I'm paraphrasing incorrectly, let me know. What kind of differences are you seeing between these two different student bodies and how they're engaged in the class, between the undergrads and the grad students? So we're going back to the student theme again. Again, if you'd like to respond, there's a podium slot. You can just click that and pop up on stage. Or if you'd like to type in the chat box, or if you'd like to type in an ask and give us a question. I'd be curious, George, to play that difference out a couple of ways. And one is by age, because since the average age of students is getting higher, of undergrads, in some ways, the undergrad experience is getting closer to the grad experience, at least in terms of demographics. But I'd also be curious about the impact of things like student loans, which are much greater for graduate programs. Oh, and welcome to a few more people who joined us. Hello, Tom. I hope you're staying dry in Houston. And George, I don't know if I greeted you before, but welcome. I'm glad to see you here. Well, while we were thinking about that, again, thinking about the student experience, we have a couple of comments from Rita, who mentions that her Center for Teaching and Learning just joined with Educational Technology Services to make a new unit, Teaching and Learning Services. So we have the question of, amoeba-like absorption of a shrinking number of units as they unify. They also have research IT. Rita, is that people who are researching computing science, say high-speed performance, that kind of thing, or is it people who are using IT to do academic research, like digital humanities? So we have a whole set of questions looking ahead. David, I want to ask, are there any other trends that you're seeing looking ahead when it comes to technology in campus or to students? I mean, you've got quite a variety to look at.
I have something that's more of on the kind of the faculty side of things.
Sure, go ahead.
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot has been kind of where we're going with the faculty role. How people have done things with Unbundle, some of the faculty role, especially around developing courses and materials and things. And so in my role at Penn State, a lot of what we're working with has been trying to share those materials outside of our online audience and trying to make it more usable by faculty teaching residential courses and things. And so, in that conversation, there's always questions about who should be maintaining these things. And as we develop things that are going to be used for not just an online audience, what does that look like in terms of development, management, life cycle, of compensation for development materials? What does that mean in terms of using external materials or OER or publisher materials? And so kind of that's something I think is kind of a hot topic, especially just for me, as probably others. Where are we going with this as we develop new content and have more content available for faculty to use? And what does that mean for students in terms of acquiring that content? Are we going to, move away from a lot of expensive publisher materials and develop our own things, rely more on OER? And so I think a lot of that is starting to heat up.
Are you seeing any interest in Pennsylvania as a whole about supporting OER? That is the state government funding OER, encouraging it, or are you seeing what's the system called? I'm sorry, I always get it wrong. Is it PASHE? Yeah. Are they doing that at a system level, that kind of thing?
I'm not quite as familiar with the PASHE efforts in OER. We do have within Penn State, we have an OER initiative, and we're working on some textbooks, developing textbooks and things, and working closely with our library and our campuses and colleges on some efforts in that area. But I don't know that we're working with PASHE or outside.
Well, one of the things I love about having dozens of people together thinking and talking, and sometimes separated by miles and by conversations, is the way that the synergies begin to flow. So you're talking about this, and thank you, by the way. I mean, Pennsylvania is an enormous state with a huge higher education sector. So where you guys go is very, very important. So you're talking about this notion of materials for students to be able to support them. And then we had in the chat, different people hit this from different sides. Dave Hooker at OSU mentioned affordability being a big issue in general. Of course, that's one place where textbook materials come from. And then Rita mentions they have an initiative to make course materials cheaper for students, such as creating ebooks and so on. So I think that's a really, really important detail. I mean, Tom takes us to the question of defining OER, which is always tricky. But I think this may be a rising current. You're right, Tom, we've been thinking about OER for a long time, but it may be that incrementally this is just rising bit by bit. It may be that by May of 2018, we can look back over this academic year and say, okay, we've had more usage, we've had more examples, more content, and open is beginning to grow. Dave, and by the way, Dave, okay, just to be clear, I'm a University of Michigan grad 3 times over. That's why I'm making fun of you for Ohio State. So don't feel bad. It's not personal, except it, of course, it is. But he mentioned the state doesn't see us getting totally away from publishers, but reducing dependence. So this is, if I could, this is something that I'm tracking very carefully, and it's really tricky to do this. But if we have open education resources here, and we have open access and scholarly publication here, there are a lot of similarities. In both fields, we have established proprietary publishers who date back decades, if not centuries. And they do have pretty healthy profit, and they have a business model involved selling to faculty and to students and to libraries. Both of these are under some threat. In the case of OER, the idea of open resources and content that threatens textbooks. In the case of open access scholarship, that threatens a proprietary model. And both of these we've been talking about for a while, and they're both incrementally growing, and we keep pushing them further and further. And they both have a lot of impact on campus finance. Open access and scholarly publication, not for individual finance that much, although there is some of that, but more for library budgets and faculty budgets, and OER more for student budgets. So perhaps we will see this question of affordability really push open across those two fronts. That's one thought. Talking about, Tara, why don't you forward that text question? We have another question that's come up. Amanda Major wants to know, are there trends in competency-based learning, assessing quality course and programs, personalized adaptive learning, utilizing data analytics for attention to student success? Yes, what a fantastic question. And those are major, major trends. All of those are very, very significant. And I'll just quickly hit on a couple of these. I'd love to hear from the rest of you to see what your experience is with all of these. Competency-based education, or CBE, seems to be continuing to grow, especially among state universities and among community colleges, where there's more and more interest in this, especially where the campuses are trying to attract adult learners. There have been some of this from, for example, military populations, but also for the general idea of adult learners, people who aren't 18, who don't have to go through a first-year experience, but who want to leap ahead into whatever the field is. In terms of assessing quality course and programs, there seems to be general interest in that, and the idea that online programs can be improved. I'd be really curious to see where you folks see that. Personalized adaptive learning, there's interest across the board, including K-12, to support that. Data analytics for attention student success, ditto. And in fact, we've been hearing, if we go back to what Dave was saying a few minutes ago, there's a sense that that campuses really should think about data analytics as a kind of cross-spectrum thing, a subject that everybody has to pay attention to and be involved with. So you think about how student success could work. It's really across the board. That involves advisors, it involves student life, it involves faculty, it involves librarians. We had just a few weeks ago, helped publish a report from EDUCAUSE about major campus IT trends. I just put a link to it in the chat box. And I'll skip over the methodology for now, but the idea was to find what trends were having the biggest impact on campuses in the US. And the third most influential trend was data-driven decision-making. The second most influential trend was student success with focus. Now, you see how those two really deeply interact, where students generate data and they begin to manipulate that and respond to it and use it to improve their success. These are really, really major trends. So I'm really glad Amanda brought these up. Here's the link to it. Now, I was wondering if we could take a few minutes now and mingle and talk about these issues. I'd like to have a session where we pair up or get in groups of 3 or 4. Now, the way to do this is very simple. I'm going to climb off the stage and join you guys. And if you don't feel like talking to somebody, that's okay. Just on the bottom of your screen, there's that white strip. In the bottom right is a little lock. Click that. And that's if you can't talk or if you don't want to talk to people. That's fine. If you would like to talk, think about this topic. What are the technological changes that are happening over this next academic year? And think not just in terms of what's changing internally within your campus, such as the new LMS being rolled out or implementing data analytics, but also think about global changes in technology and how they might be impacting you. For example, do you think your campus is likely to have Amazon Dash buttons? Do you think your campus is likely to start pushing for electric cars for their fleet? Do you see students bringing newer and newer devices to campus that you don't currently support? Let's do that. Let's take 5 minutes and let's think about that. What are the major technological changes ahead for the next 10 months? And we'll report back in about 6 minutes. So let's chat. It's always a dizzying moment. Oh, hello, Matthew. Glad you could make it. Hello, Jack. Good talking with you by email from last week's conversation. David Stone offers a very, very powerful assessment from the economic side, where he argues that students are price sensitive. And this is actually controversial because for a long time, the assumption was that students were price sensitive. Price sensitive means what it says, that students are, or anybody, is likely to change their behavior based on price. The more expensive something is, for example, the less likely you are to buy as much of it. And for a long time, the idea was that colleges and universities could basically charge whatever the market would bear, and students would keep going. And that for textbooks, students would buy textbooks because they were required for classes. It seems now that we're seeing price sensitivity among students. They may be changing different institutions accordingly. They may be coming up with other ways of getting their materials. Hello, Ray. Can you hear us?
Hello. Am I?
You're muted here. How about
I've been
now?
muted.
No, you're fine. Right.
Okay, you can hear me.
Garcelon, right?
Correct.
Where are you from, right?
I'm up in Alaska.
Oh, fantastic. University of Alaska, Anchorage?
Yeah, I'm in Sitka, one of the satellite campuses.
You don't work with Chris Lott by any chance, do you?
I've heard that name, but he must not be on my campus. He's either in Juneau or maybe Anchorage.
I think
But
he's
yeah, I'm
Anchorage.
trying to remember where I heard his name.
Track him down. Brilliant, brilliant guy. Wonderful
Chris
guy.
Lott.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, well, welcome, Ray.
I'll track
Welcome.
him down. Yeah, I had a discussion with Amanda Major, who brought up the things about
Yes.
CBA and that. And
Yes.
I attached her because I was trying to think of a topic that kind of linked to the others.
Yes.
So I asked her, and she's at UCF, University of Central Florida, and I know that's a pretty substantial institution with online learning. And I asked her, one thing I asked her, I said, learning analytics, how is it being used? And she told me, and she can comment after this if I get something wrong from our conversation. But she said there's not a lot of intense usage from faculty. And
Huh.
basically with learning analytics, I see it, I said I'm seeing it as such a coming from, I guess, the profession, that it's such an imperative in terms of how it attaches to having better competency-based learning, how it attaches to better adaptive learning. So I said I was.
profession, Ray? You said coming from the profession.
Quicker question.
Which
Oh,
profession?
pardon?
You said it's coming
Which
from
profession?
the profession.
And then she brought up one area she brought up that maybe it's a good application is for SOTO, having learning analytics be part of doing more scholarship of teaching and learning by analyzing the things of a program. So basically my inquiry and comments were that there's such a importance placed on learning analytics, but are the tools developed enough, call it the LMSs or adaptive tools, are the learning analytics developed enough and usable enough to kind of spread out and serve all those other purposes of better adaptive learning, better computer-based learning?
Well, it may be that it's still too early and that we're in the, like for learning analytics, it could be that we're in the days of, say, FTP and Notepad for making web pages, which works, but not for everybody.
Yeah,
now I don't
just pre-Windows 95, maybe.
Well, I know, or Tom Hames in the chat says we're in the Uber days of learning analytics. Dave Hooker adds it seems to be in its infancy. I know Blackboard has been pushing some learning analytics tools, and I know that Purdue University has a kind of dashboard. It's a little controversial, but it's designed to be easier to use for faculty. But this is a good point. And if UCF is having this issue, then that's really big. As you said, they have a large.
I'm just commenting on what Amanda said to me. I don't have any really in-depth or any knowledge of what's going on at UCF with learning analytics per se. That's Amanda's there. Yeah.
Well, Amanda, we'd love to hear more from you. You just contribute mightily to this conversation.
Yeah, if she wants. I'm not trying to volunteer her either, but the big thing is like learning analytics. So it's such an important thing, but how is it being made available and developed for instructors so that critical mass can happen where it's more useful?
When the chat box, I was just going to add one more thing. Tom Hames has this great, almost Zen-like statement. Tech is getting simpler. However, what you can do with it is increasingly complex. That's interesting. That sometimes the interface might be something we can grapple with, but what it does is daunting. That's a great point.
Yeah, that was the other thought I had, that even if they make really better tools and they are more intuitive, at some point there is mathematics and statistics involved, and maybe there's a real problem with your average instructor or group of instructors in the department to really have the ability and the time, the efficiency to make good use of them.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I'm hoping for better tools that are more readily available in the LMSs.
Well, we should
Maybe
watch for
before 5 or 10 years.
that. And maybe
So-
faster than that.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
That's
Ray.
all I'll
I'm
say
glad
on
you-
that. Thank you.
Welcome aboard. How about the rest of you guys? What else came up in your chats? So when you had a chance to talk to people, I'm thinking of George or Vicky or Tom, or if you didn't have a chance to talk, if you were just simply thinking about this stuff, what came up in your mind, in your reflection? So I'm thinking of Lauren or Brenda or Mark or Jack. What came up that you really want to share with the rest of us? Rita gives us another just elegantly phrased statement to go along with Tom's, that individually the technology tools are simpler, but now there are so many tools that it can seem more complicated to teach and design. That's really, really true. That's a really good point. You think about what it means to be using not just an LMS and an ERP system, but you also have to use the Office suite. You will have, if you're a faculty member, you also have discipline-specific technology. So you could be using SPSS or R or some chemical tool. Plus, we now have the open world, which is making it more. That's not a tool, but that does add more complexity. It may be that Tom's right. The technology integration is a very, very crucial skill. What else did you guys find looking ahead, thinking about April, May, June 2018? What are some of the other issues or trends that you see shaping and changing your experience? We've mentioned students' changes. We've mentioned IT organization changes. We talked about some changes for faculty. We talked about new academic programs for student success, data analytics, adaptive learning, competency-based learning. What else are we going to be seeing? What else are you seeing in particular? Rita and Tom I think Rita and Tom need to have their own program because they are fantastic at this. Tom mentions playing the orchestra will become more important than playing the trumpet. A good metaphor. Rita jumps back. Faculty continue to play their instruments and that the need for a conductor becomes more critical. We do have some conductors. We have program managers. And you can also think about places where we have a great deal of adjuncts who are definitely more like symphony musicians and less like soloists. George Station gets really imperial and says that we are the new conductors. Keep an eye on George. This is a dangerous, dangerous man. What else are you seeing? And if your camera works, if you would like to join us. I say if your camera works, but also if your mic works. Dave Hooker adds another really, really important point about accessibility. This is a huge challenge for web delivery content. We have one person here from Berkeley. Of course, famously, Berkeley ran into a big issue of accessibility earlier this year. It's especially true for graphical content, charts. Dave, you say LA tools. Do you mean language or something else? Learning analytics, thank you. When we're thinking about graphics, but also audio, about video, and also when we're talking about 3D or we're talking about VR, we have huge amounts of accessibility challenges there, and that's just going to increase. Dave Stone notes there's more video these days. I don't see an end to it. People are constantly making more and more video. In fact, a series of publishers have just started axing their non-video units in order to push out more content towards video. Mark, oh, good to hear from you. Mark Wilson says he just transferred to a former University Without Walls in the pursuit of individualized studies degree. He's been using Pearson's Brightspace. Let me just quote, the foundation course to designing one's degree path is readings with short responses, and so far the students are no more engaged online than in my former community colleges. I'm putting computing and digital technology at the center of my learning. Friends, always keep an eye on Mark. Mark is a trailblazer. Back to accessibility, Dave Hooker mentions MediaSite using Watson to do audio captioning, but still not hitting the 95% accuracy standard. It's true. We're still automating that, we're not quite there. Transcription is there right now for, say, lecture capture, for medical transcription. And that's been demonstrated. It hasn't been released at product levels yet. But that's something to watch for very, very carefully. Well, this is quite an array of possibilities that we're seeing. I don't see anybody arguing for a major break happening this year, no major shock or transformation happening. But it seems that we're seeing the continued development of a whole series of trends that we've been following. Back to Amanda. Hello, Amanda. How important is accessibility tools for assessing courses? To qualify Ray's statement, UCF has created a performance dashboard for faculty to utilize that has begun analytics initiative. Well, that's a good point. Amanda, by accessibility tools, do you mean tools for increasing accessibility, such as screen readers? We have time for her to answer or for you guys to add a bit more. Well, one more just came from Tom in chat in response to my comment about shocks. He said we've had enough shocks this last year. Well, we don't see any political shock schedule. That is, we don't have an election and we don't have any major transformation, something like that. But we do have a lot of political tremors, if not outright shocks. So, for example, we have this week Congress being charged with trying to do something with DACA and Dreamers. It's possible that we have, as I've said before, as others have noted, that we may have some kind of major conflict in campus between either pro-immigrant students or anti-immigrant students, faculty and staff, or between sanctuary campuses and ICE agents. So that's one area of shock that we really could have. We also may have rising student political activism, and that could ripple out in all kinds of interesting ways, perhaps with growth of Black Lives Matter, or perhaps activism on other scores, be it gender or sexuality or identity. Now, one shock that is scheduled, I'm afraid, is the end of the hour. We have just hit the end of our session, 3 o'clock on EDT time. And as always, this has been a bracing rush through. George adds about California State. George has been following this very closely, that California State University system has been doing some really interesting stuff with revising general education. Keep an eye on how that unfolds. That's an enormous system, a lot of students. We'll have to see how that goes. Let me thank everybody. It's hard in the first day of a year, the first week of a year, to look ahead to the end of it. It's a good exercise, and you are all more than up to the challenge. It's always an honor and privilege to be with you, to be able to think about this way, to think hard of the future of education. And I'm glad that you've been able to do it with me. Now, along the way, let me point out where things are going for the next week or so. So to begin with, if you're not an FTTE subscriber, the September issue went out this morning, so you should have a copy of that. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. Next week, our guest is the editor-in-chief of the Hechinger Report. It's Liz Willen. So if you haven't been reading it, the Hechinger Report does some really great quality reporting about changes in education and technology. She's an extremely bright person, has a lot of great ideas. I'm very much looking forward to that. Now, if you have nothing else to do, if you're concerned about where technology and education are going, if you're wondering about all this work behind us, there are URLs you can take a look at. You can go to shindig.com to learn more about this technology. You can go to ftte.us to learn more about the Future Trends Report, or you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Alexander. In the meantime, let me thank everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm looking forward to further conversations down the road. Bye-bye.